There are some stories that stay with you long after you hear them. Stories that remind us just how fragile life can be and how grief can reshape a person in ways most of us can't even imagine. Today's story is about a mother named Susan Shaw. On social media, many people know her as Bereavement Mom. But before that name, before the posts and the community that she's built around loss, Susan was a wife and mom raising her family. William was 9 years old, 9, an age filled with curiosity, laughter, and the kind of energy that keeps parents constantly on their toes. The age where childhood still feels endless, where the world is full of adventures waiting to happen. One of those adventures was skiing. For many families, a day on the slopes means fresh air, excitement, and memories made together. But for Susan and her family, a ski trip became something no parent ever imagines facing. A tragic accident took William's life. In an instant, the life Susan knew was split into two parts, before and after her son William's loss. The loss of a child is often described as the worst grief a person can experience. It's not the natural order of things. Parents are not supposed to outlive their children, and yet for Susan, that reality became her life. In the months and years that followed, Susan began sharing her grief openly. She didn't hide the pain. She didn't pretend healing was simple or linear. For Susan, remembering William isn't just about looking back. It's about keeping his story alive, honoring his 9 years that he was here, and helping others who are walking the same heartbreaking road. On social media, Susan, better known as Bereavement Mom, through her posts, she shares the raw truth of grief, the pain, the memories, the quiet moments when the absence of a child feels overwhelming. But alongside the honesty is something equally powerful: hope. Susan made a decision that many people in deep grief struggle to find. She chose to turn William's memory into a legacy. Through her words and her presence online, she has created a space where grieving parents don't feel alone. Her posts are often uplifting, but they're also real. She doesn't sugarcoat the experience of loss, and the authenticity is exactly what so many people connect with. Susan didn't stop there. She took that mission even further by creating a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting grieving parents. An organization built from love, from loss, and from the desire to help others survive the kind of pain that changes a life forever. And that's the extraordinary thing about Susan's journey. Out of her heartbreak, she has built something meaningful, something that honors William's life, keeps his memory alive, and helps other parents find support when they need it the most. This is Andrea Gregg, and you're listening to Death Talk Canada. Hi, Susan. I'd like to welcome you to the Death Talk Canada podcast. And I also call you the Bereavement Mom, as you go
Mm-hmm.
by on
Oh,
Instagram.
absolutely. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you
I'm
so
so glad
much
you
for
are.
reaching
Thank
out.
you. Maybe I'll just start by getting you to introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about you and why we're here today.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Susie Shaw. I live currently outside of Boston in a little town called Carlisle, Massachusetts. And for the last 7 years, I have been a bereaved mom. I'm the mother to three children. One of them, my oldest, William, he died on February 19th, 2019. He was 9 years old when he died while we were on a family ski trip out in Big Sky, Montana. And that event has completely changed the trajectory of our family, and the way that we now walk through the world. We also have a son. His name is Kai. He's 13, almost 14. He was 6 when William died. And then after William died, we decided to have another child. His name is Bodie, and he is 5. And I have spent the last 7 years, as I said, um, healing, and it'll be a lifelong process, but really trying to process my grief and the trauma that has come along with losing a child. And in the last few years, I've really stepped into advocacy and education about grief, and being sensitive, cultivating like a sensitivity for my community and the population at large about how to respond to grievers because we just don't do it very well. We don't know how to hold death, especially child death. And so grievers end up feeling so isolated and alone. And so I've been working really hard to try to change the narrative or add to the narrative.
Yes, and as I've told you, I happened upon you from social media, and you were a huge inspiration to me. And thank goodness that I haven't had a loss like you have experienced. But as a funeral director, I found that very inspiring because unfortunately, I've had to deal with many families throughout my career that have lost children, and it is obviously the most delicate loss that
Mhm.
anybody can ever experience. And yes, people are terrified of death anyway, let alone something this sensitive, something this huge as losing your dear child. Um, do you mind, Sue, telling us, about that day and what happened and
Of course.
yeah,
Yeah.
super fascinating.
So we we had been a ski family. My husband grew up skiing, as did I, but I enjoyed it, but it was, fine for me. My husband just like lives and breathes skiing. So, as soon as either of our children were old enough to put on skis, they were on skis, and we were going up north to Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, sort of the places close to us here in Boston. And they were in ski school from the time they were 2 years old, probably. And as they grew and got more experienced, we decided to head out west for our school vacations. So we had been out west for a few years. And William, in fact, was on a racing team. He was an excellent skier, very, very prepared. My husband was such a great skier. So we never really worried about their safety, even though we know, you have to be prepared. So we would prepare for skiing, but it felt like any other activity that we chose to do. Like I love to go to the beach, and we are very, capable at the beach. And we love to hike and go on mountains. Very, very cognizant of the risks, but always prepared. So the same thing was happening on our ski trip. Um, and that particular day, it was I think our third day on the mountain. My husband and William went up to the top where it's much more difficult to ski. And so I wasn't with them, and I spent time on some of the easier trails with my younger son. And we had this plan to meet up after they had finished the really challenging part of the mountain called Lone Peak. And it was a beautiful day. It's something they call a bluebird day, where the sun is shining. There's very few clouds. Um, and so I got a call from my husband. He was sort of mid-mountain and said, "Oh, William did an amazing job at the top. He crushed it. His skiing was just off the charts. Best run of his life." And I said, "Oh, that's so fabulous to hear. I can't wait to talk to him about it." And my husband said, "We'll be down in 5 minutes." And so my son Kai and I, we got on the chairlift. We were going to do one more quick run on the easy bunny slope before they got down. And I got a call on the chairlift, and I decided to ignore it because I was like, I could see it was from Nick, but I had my mitten on, and I just, we just talked. It's fine. I'll see. He's probably wondering where we are now. Um, and he called again, and he called again, and he called again. And I finally picked it up I think we were down at the bottom of that little trail that we took, but I might have been mid-mountain. I honestly don't remember. And he said to me, "Where's William? Have you seen William?" And I said to him, What do you mean? He's with you. I'm with Kai." And he said, I don't know where William went. Did he, I can't find him. He must have skied past me and you've got to find, he must be down there. And so that was the start of the end, really. Um, my uh, sorry. We, I started searching the bottom. Nick, from what he told me later, he took off his skis and traveled back up the trail that they were on to try to find any sign of William. There was nothing, no indication that William had gone off the side. I ended up skiing back to our cabin that we had because it was a ski in, ski out, thinking maybe
You might have
William.
been thinking that he went back there. You wanted to,
Exactly. Like he knew how to traverse the mountain and he couldn't find his dad, so he decided to go back to our cabin. Nick finally found some ski patrollers and a search ensued. He was searching the bottom, like the base and the lodges to see if William was in there. Um, we had some friends who were with us on that particular trip, and we were able to contact them, and they started searching. One of them was a firefighter and a paramedic. Eventually, he was the one who found William off the side of the trail that Nick and he had been on, a very easy, like meandering trail. So he was the one who found William at the base of a tree. And we found out later that he had died on impact. Um, and eventually they called. I was at the cabin. Nick called me to tell me that something terrible had happened. And by the time I got down to the ski patrol clinic where they had taken him, he was dead. I mean, I found out that he was dead, I should say. And we had to figure out, how to get William back to Boston. And then the process of holding a funeral for a 9-year-old in a really small town where everybody knows each other and the whole town is focused on the school. And it was unbelievably hard to be that family in our town whose child had died. There had been another child about 35 years prior to William dying. And so it
and
truly
that hits a
affected
small town, like, you know,
5,000 people, the whole, um, uh, the whole town
yeah.
supported us beautifully. And it was sort of like they were all looking at us too. It was really heavy. And
Tell me what it was like for you the moment you heard those words,
oh,
I just can't, as a mother, even begin to imagine like how unbelievably
I
shocked.
mean, it crushed me. So I knew when we were still in the cabin, I knew that something terrible had happened because Nick called and told me, and I immediately fell to the ground. And I remember screaming into the carpet. I went into the bedroom because the other children were in the living room, and I went into the bedroom and I just started screaming. My friend sort of picked me up, put me in the car, and we drove down to the clinic. Again, I still didn't know yet that William was dead. We arrived at the clinic, and there was this man. He was part of ski patrol, and he was standing in front of the door. And by the way that he was holding himself, I just knew my son was dead. Like his body language told me, and I ran away. I was supposed to go in the clinic and I ran away because I had this thought like if I don't go in, if I don't see it, it won't be
Not real.
real. I wanted to just get away and then it wouldn't have happened. But obviously I had to go in. My friend sort of helped me get in. And the first thing I saw was my husband. And I immediately knew that he was feeling the weight of William's death on him, on his shoulders. I could tell that he felt wholly responsible for this and did not want to break the news to me. And so I ran over to him. And I don't necessarily remember this, but he told me the first thing I said was, "It's not your fault." Because I knew that that's what he needed to hear.
Yeah.
And I knew that it could have just as easily been my fault, or that not my fault, but like
You could
me
have
with
been there.
William, that it could have been me who, with Kai, and Kai had gone off the train. There was no reason that it was Nick versus me. Nick is my husband. And so I saw that pain in him, and my first reaction was to at least try to relieve him of that burden. Now he for weeks and months and probably years he felt that burden still, but um I needed him to know that like this was not him. He did not do this.
And you were the
Um
most important person to have delivered that information to him because as William's mother, oftentimes, parents do blame, the parent that was there and I mean, that's pretty spectacular in itself that in that moment you knew that you had to make him realize that that was not in any way, shape, or
right,
form his responsibility or his fault,
right,
that happened.
right.
Yeah, that's
And
pretty amazing.
and he has said to me, like, you had every right, and it would have been fine if you came in and wanted to punch me, all the whatever. Any reaction in that moment was right. you
Yeah.
know However, he credits my reaction to really the start of our family moving forward in a positive way. um and again, it wasn't intention, like I wasn't calculating in my brain like what should I say, but it just sort of that came out, and it really set, in an odd way, it set the tone for how we
You're like a
progressed.
natural nurturer, yeah,
Yeah, I guess so.
yeah, that's
I,
pretty
yeah.
amazing. Um, so yes, I mean, what was it like he must have had a huge funeral in your town. I mean,
We did. So we were part of the Unitarian Universalist Church in my town, which also happens to be like our community hall. Because again, we're such a small little town. And it's in the center of our town. So there was about 1,000 people who came. We had the reception at our school because it's the biggest place to hold people. Um, it was a beautiful event that was just so unbelievably tragically sad.
and
Um,
I see your posts a lot talking about your community was really what you leaned on initially and still to this day. And this
yeah,
obviously, I'm sure is a huge part of what you mean, and
yeah.
could you explain a little bit about that? Like, is that your church? Is that the whole community?
Well, yeah, it's everything. It is the church. It was the school. It was the friends who live here that knew William, who didn't know William, who had peers in his classes. We couldn't. We were paralyzed with grief and shame and trauma. We couldn't plan things, and nor could my extended family. So my friends and extended, network in our town, they took over everything, and I highly recommend that. And give over the control because it's so hard to even think straight when you lose a child. And then we had another child at home too that we had to parent. So having other people who loved us and loved William make decisions like, what songs to to have at the funeral and what food
Yes.
to serve, like although we didn't even write the obituary, a girlfriend of mine did, because all those details add up to all of this strenuous work, and it's so
And you're not
hard.
thinking straight. I mean, you're
No.
still in shock. You're like you said, trauma. I mean, I can't even imagine the state of disbelief that you must have been in. And I'm sure even to
Yeah.
this day you still think like I can't believe he's not here.
Oh, 100%. Like okay, like I'm like, oh, see, he's right. No, that's not him. It's I've become more accustomed to it, to his absence for sure. But in those first couple of months, it was like, well, he's out with Fran, he's somewhere, and he'll be right home. So yeah, there was so much support that we got. We had people doing our laundry for 6 months, and like, if there are people in your life who are offering to be supportive, to help, This is the time to take those offers, you know.
And what a message to just be involved with people. And, I don't know what it's like where you are, but, I'm in a very small town too. And, less and less people are in organizations anymore, like church, church
Mhm.
pews, they're getting empty. Even at different groups and sporting events and stuff. And so if nothing else, it's a nice message that it is very important to have some sort of a community, people around you to be involved. Because
Oh, so that
those are the
so
people.
that they can come in and help you.
Yeah.
My husband credits me for building a community within my town. I led the Carlisle Education Foundation, and I was on this board and that board, and I made relationships, and I made a place for us here. He was kind of like, anonymous,
Yeah.
and he talked about how important it was that we had built that foundation of community, because then they were so um they wanted to support us, they wanted to help us, and people feel so helpless in times of crisis like this. They want to help, but they don't necessarily know how. And so it's like, oh, well, come and take out the Shaw's trash. Come and, like, we had people mulch our yard in the spring because that's a tangible thing that they could
It
do
is.
for us.
Absolutely.
Um, and so it gave people purpose too, and they felt good about helping in a time when everybody just feels so helpless. Nobody's bringing William back. Nobody's going to make us feel better about the fact that our child has died, but they can make our life easier by cooking us meals every week.
Like you said, it's
So
real help. It's real help. It's not just I don't know what to say, and
yeah.
yeah,
Do the
that's
acts. These acts of service become so important. And people would take our son Kai out for different activities, because we didn't have the stamina to entertain him, but he wanted to still be a kid. So it was like, okay, go take him to the Halloween parade. We can't celebrate Halloween this year, but he wanted to. So
of
people took,
course.
like, all those kinds of things were so helpful. I mean, William died in February. We still were unable to do Halloween, months later. So it keeps that those acts of service can keep going for a long, long time.
And I mean, Kai obviously lost his brother, his big brother. I
Mhm.
mean,
Mhm.
what was his experience like through that, and how did you recognize, what he needed through that initial time?
That's so interesting. He was 6.5 when William died, and Nick and I talk about how it was almost like the perfect age for him to lose a brother, if you will, because he still had these memories of his brother, um, very concrete, and unlike if he was like 2 or 3, like he might not have had those memories, but he was young enough that it wasn't like the most horrendous thing that had happened, like it was to me, say, or if he was a teenager. Um, and so he was still able to remember his brother, but not be 100% devastated by it.
I get that.
Um, yeah, I mean,
I
and
understand.
it's now affecting him in deeper ways because he's a teenager and he's starting to process things differently. Um, we recognized pretty early on the differences that we all had in our grief, but especially with Kai. Um, maybe like day 4 or 5, like me and Nick, we could not look at pictures of William. It was just too hard, and it made us so sad. And Nick noticed that all of a sudden Kai got a hold of my husband's phone and saw some pictures of William and was had a huge smile on his face. And we were like, "Oh my gosh, he needs pictures of," and we were like, "Okay, so we as a family, we all need different things." I needed to talk, Nick needed to be quiet, Kai needed to see pictures of his, so that was the initial point of us being like, okay, we're all in this together and we're all doing this very differently. And for us, one of the things we immediately did was find a family therapist. And she helped us work out all of those differences in our grieving and what Kind needed as a child and what we needed as adults and what we needed as a family. And we just created space for all of us to feel what we were feeling, to talk about what we needed or not or didn't need. Kai needed his friends. Kai needed like he never really cried. Um, but he would get kind of this, like he would always say, I'm tired. And that for us was like, oh, that means you're sad right now. And so we're gonna just, watch a show or read a quiet story. We also really leaned into a peer support, which for our family was huge, and I highly recommend it. Like I said, we were the first family in our town and in our school system who had had a child die in 35 years. So we felt really strongly that Kind needed to be with other children who had lost siblings. So we found a support group where he could do that. And we spent 7 years going there. We just stopped.
Wow.
But it was just so important for us to have Kai feel like one among many versus the only kid on the team whose brother died. That's really isolating.
Absolutely.
Um, so we provided him with a space to learn coping mechanisms with other children who had lost siblings.
It just sounds like from the very beginning that you were such a doer, and like everything that you did was very methodical, and in a sense, even though I'm sure you didn't feel logical at the time, but it really, you made really wise decisions and reached out and took the help.
Yeah.
And I don't see everybody doing that all the time, so I think you guys are unique in the sense that you really knew how to support each other and seek the help that you
We,
all
I
need.
just, I recognized that we needed help. Like
Yeah.
this thing felt so big. I had no role model for, the path to follow. I didn't know anybody who had lost a child. So it was like, well, let's get all the experts that we possibly can, and that sort of, or all the support, right? And that set us on a path. And both me and my husband had been in different therapy before, and so we were familiar with.
You weren't a stranger to it, but certainly,
No, and we
yeah,
were very like we were like no shame, like please
exactly.
therapist, help us.
Yes. Um, and the other thing I wanted to ask you about, Susan, was a couple of your posts I saw. You were discussing the fact that you kind of regret not having an autopsy done. Um,
Oh,
could you explain a little bit about A, why it wasn't done, and B, why do you kind of regret it now?
of course, yeah. So this is something that still, yeah, it haunts me. So I actually assumed that William got an autopsy. We for reasons that I can't express, we felt the immediate need to get out of Big Sky. We thought someone else would die if we didn't leave. It was that fear, that fight or flight. We just needed to do the flight, right? Get us out of Montana. So William died, and we decided that we booked a plane to go home the next day. And we left William's body at that point in the hands of the professionals in Big Sky. I know that he went to a mortuary and they embalmed him, and so that he could fly back a few days later. You're probably more familiar with
Yeah,
this process
yeah,
than
yeah.
me. Um, and so we went back, and I left it up to the professionals in the area
You didn't
to
think of
no.
what needed to be done. No.
Right. And then a few days later, we got a call from the coroner's office, and they told us that William's cause of death was blunt force trauma to the chest and head. And in my head, that made sense. And I was like, they did the autopsy, and this was his cause of death, and now we're going to move on because he's dead. There's nothing else I can do. Um, and we decided to have William cremated. So once he did get home and after the funeral, he was cremated. Um, and then I kind of always, I didn't quite understand how William could have died from hitting a tree, and he was such a good skier, and it was an easy trail, and all the like, I just kind of had this like weird feeling in my stomach for a while. Um, but I never did anything about it. I just kind of let it stew. And then I was sitting in a group only a few years ago. So it was probably like 5 years after William died. And a bunch of the other moms who had lost children were talking about their autopsies on their children. And they were talking about how long they took. And one mother was like, it's been a year. This was like a sudden, unexplained death in children. Another one, it took a few months. And I was like, oh my gosh, mine only took like 3 days. And they're like, that's not possible. And and so all of a sudden I started to like panic. I'm like, but maybe he never had an autopsy. And so I got all this courage up because I was so afraid. I was so afraid to peel back the layers. Um, but I called the coroner. And it was a new coroner from when William had been, but he clarified that no, William had never had an autopsy. Um, and my heart sort of sank. And then we went back to Montana in the summer, because I wanted to see where William had died. Separate from the autopsy thing, I realized at one point that I really wanted to see where he had died, where he had taken his last breath. And the ski patrollers and the people who work at the mountain, they were so gracious and kind, and they took us up and showed us where he had died. And it was this very small tree, not anything that looked like it could have killed him, to be honest. And there was a few people in the group. One of them was a doctor who was kind of like, yeah, I don't really understand what happened. Um, and with all of those pieces, for me, no autopsy, um, the tree, and sort of a doctor sort of like, I had always had this gut feeling, what if he died of a medical event prior to him hitting the tree? Like he went off the trail because he had
An
a
asthma
cardiac,
attack.
well, no, a cardiac
Or
arrest or something.
that, yeah.
Um, and and so that's where this whole conversation sort of stems from. Like, I wish that he had had an autopsy to rule out that sort of thing. That would have shown.
Yeah.
Um,
Because it leaves that little,
it's a question mark. I don't know how he died.
yeah.
Nobody saw him go off the trail. He could have gotten distracted and gone off the trail, and yes, the tree could have killed him, but he also could have died from a medical event that we didn't know about.
I can
Yeah.
understand that. Yeah. And
Yeah, and it's really frustrating not to know the truth because my children asked me how he died. One thing that I did do was have them fully tested for any type of genetic or
ooh,
non-genetic cardiac risks and assessment. So that feels good. Like I
yeah.
took control that way. Um, but because I feel like the people in Montana didn't do their due diligence. They saw him, they knew that he was found at the base of a tree, and they just made the assumption that that's how he died without looking further. And
And
I
I
wish
know,
I had understood that before. I assumed everybody got an autopsy. That's
yeah.
how naive I was.
And I know every state is different, just as every province is different here. But in Nova Scotia, like any unexpected, unexplained, undetermined death is an automatic full autopsy, full forensic autopsy. So for me, that's a little alarming too, that a child,
Yeah.
but I mean, again, it must have just been their policy, it's obvious, it's blunt force trauma, but yeah, I can
Yeah.
see as a mother that would leave that nagging little
Yeah.
doubt and question,
Yeah.
of
And I
course.
don't want to hold on to that, but
No,
and sometimes I leave it aside, and then sometimes it pops up again.
of course.
Um,
It just
but
was interesting to me that I don't see mothers talking about that a lot. So that was something that I really wanted to touch on because, the fact that you got there to that point of knowing that he didn't and questioning that.
yeah, and so I mean, I hope that no mother ever has to follow that path. But now I'm trying to just tell people like, don't assume.
Yeah.
Don't assume that. And I got a lot of responses from families, and even with adults. They were like, "Oh yeah, we had to pay for it," or these are not standard procedures like they make you think on television.
Exactly. Good point. Good point.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I've also seen you talk about how, you really invest in safety now. Do you mind
Mhm.
explaining that a little bit too?
Yeah, I mean, I truly believe there was no safety reason. No one was being unsafe the day that William died. Um, Nothing could have prevented his death. No one did anything wrong or out of the ordinary. There was no risks that anyone took. And Because we have decided to go back to skiing, um, I want to make sure that everyone is prepared, more prepared than we used to be, because I know what can happen. And so, having GPS locators on the children is really important because William, he did go missing. And so if he had had a tracker on him, it wouldn't have saved him, but it would have helped us locate him in a faster way because he was missing for about 2 hours. We just like to make sure everybody knows what the mountain looks like now, and planning routes and knowing, if you get off that chairlift, is there going to be a route for everybody in the group? You don't want to take a chairlift that only has experts trails when you've got a beginner with you, let's say, so really understanding the mountain. Um, but even little things like I don't let my children, if we're out and about with people and somebody has had even just one drink, I would never let my children get in the car with them. Whereas that I might have let that slide before. Like, oh, they just had a glass of wine at dinner, they're fine. No, now it's like if I can control something, I'm going to, because most things are out of our control. I know that. Like I can't control whether or not my children live or die. I've seen that it can happen, but there are circumstances that I can control, like not putting my child in a car with somebody who has had just even one drink. And so little steps like that, just to mitigate risk. We're never gonna like erase it. But I want to make our lives as safe as possible without, by the way, um, wrapping our kids in bubble wrap, because I also don't believe in that. So I want my kids to go skiing and to enjoy it and to know how much joy it brought William, but I want them to be safe. Um, I got my son Kai a phone when he was in fifth grade, which is way earlier than other children. No, it wasn't like a smartphone, he didn't have any apps or anything like that, but I needed a way to get in touch with him because I
Absolutely.
wanted him. We live, again, like I said, we live in a very small town, and in fifth grade, the children are allowed to go from school to the library and to the little county store. And so I wanted him to have that freedom with his other friends who hadn't lost a sibling. But I also wanted to know exactly where he was when he was, and so that having that security made all of us feel more confident as he went into the world. So it's like taking these little steps, being prepared, being conscientious, and also knowing that anything can happen, and we are not in control of the universe. We just aren't.
That's right. And I mean, I can relate in the sense that I grew up and I was a skier and we were always on our boats and we lived at the cottage and and of course being a Gen Xer, like we didn't even wear life jackets when we were in
No, God, no. Mm-mm,
when we went
mm-mm.
skiing, there was no helmets back
No
then.
helmets, no bike
So
helmet, no.
right. Like there was nothing. And so I get that, because we are living in a different world now and we do have those things readily available and we are being taught about safety. We're smarter now, we're wiser now. You ultimately, have experienced obviously the worst of the worst. And of course you're going to take measures. What I find amazing about you is that you actually go back to Big Sky Resort with your kids and you encourage them to continue skiing. Can you explain to
Yeah.
me what made you do, where did you find the courage
Oh
and the
my God.
inspo and the lack, like
Yeah.
fearless,
Yeah,
really?
no, 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 no. There's a lot of fear. There is a lot of fear. So when we got home after William died, I threw away everything that had anything that said Montana on it. I was like, Montana can burn in hell for all I care. And I spent many years in that place, hating Montana, hating skiing. We're never going to ski again. And as time went on, I started to realize in, just my own exploration and talking to my husband, like William loved Montana. William loved skiing. Um, and so I started to like just let it in a little bit. And then I reached out to Big Sky and asked them to name a trail after William. That was sort of the first step of me creating a relationship with Montana. Um, and then like I told you, I was on a retreat, and I was walking this meditation path, a labyrinth, and at the end of the labyrinth, like this idea came into my head. I was like, I need to see where William took his last breath. And it was just this huge feeling for me. I hadn't seen where he had died. And like I told you, we left Montana immediately afterwards. And so 5 years later, I just had this all-consuming need to just see it. So we went back just to visit, and I thought, okay, this is it. We're never coming back here. I'm just going to see the spot and be at peace with it and leave. And we pulled up the road that heads to the mountain, and we saw Lone Peak in I saw Lone Peak in front of me, and I was just like, William's here. And I was just overcome with William in the air. It was fairly wild. And I just felt such a connection to my son in Montana, in Big Sky. Like he was in the trees and the air. And I was just like, we have to be here. We need to spend time here. This is his spot. Um, and and then my son Kai had been asking, do you think we'll ever ski again? Like coinciding with me coming to terms with Montana. He had been asking. And I think my husband, obviously he was grieving the death of his son so much, but he was also grieving the loss of skiing with his children. That was a big part of his life. And and so I could see that grief and that loss for him. And so all of these things sort of coincided. And I was, after we went to Montana in the summer, I just sort of talked to the family. I was like, do you think we should try it? And it's something that I swat like I push down, not in a bad way. Like I'm facing it and I'm dealing with it. But I sort of push down the fear because I feel like at this point, the joy and the connection outweigh the fear. But it was baby steps for sure. It was one little micro step after another to get us to this point. And I don't ski yet. I don't know if I will. My 5-year-old asked me this trip, like, are you ever going to ski, Mama? And like, oh, I don't maybe. So, I haven't taken that step, but yeah, that first time I had to put a helmet on my son Kai, that was really hard. Buckle it up and send it, really hard. Um, but that first time back, like he was in private lessons. Big Sky gifted us private lessons, and so he was, I knew he would be as safe as humanly possible. So it's sort of controlled letting go.
Yeah, I think it's such an amazingly brave thing, but also navigating your whole grief um journey, because a lot of people wouldn't be able to get there, and that is just what stands out about you for me is how extraordinary you are, about still living a life for your family and a legacy for William. Like it's
Yeah, yeah, but
right.
I want to really reiterate to your listeners that like if you never get there, that's okay too. You know, yes, I'm brave and I'm doing the hard things and I'm going back to the spot where he died. And if you never go back to the spot that your child died, you are still brave for getting up every day.
Good point.
Everybody's, they have to meet themselves where they are and for what they need and what their capacity is, you know. Um, Not everybody can or should do those things. I wanted to, I tried it, it worked, right? But there are so many factors that go into how we proceed in our grief that, I don't want anyone to ever compare themselves to me or another griever that takes these, bold or bigger steps. Like you've got to meet yourself where you are and just know that you're on your own unique journey and literally just getting up every day and taking care of yourself
Good
is enough.
point. Good point.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And having your littlest little guy that's 5 now, Bodhi,
Yeah. Yeah.
it
Bodhi.
must be fun to, get him to know his big brother and be able to tell him
Yeah.
stories and share his, pictures and his life with him. That's got to be a unique situation as well.
It's actually really special. I mean, we talk about William every day. We were talking about him last night as we were going to bed. He knows William so well, and he's never met him. And
But
I'm
he knows
so
he has a
proud.
big brother. Yep.
He has two big brothers.
Yeah.
One of them is alive and one of them is dead. And I love, that's one thing I'm really proud of is the relationship that I've cultivated between William and Bodhi.
It's
Um, no, we do the same with my son Kai, but Kai knew William. He had experiences with William. There are pictures of the two of them together.
yes.
Um, so it's different. With Bodhi, it's like it's all stories and pictures just without him in it. And so yeah, that has been really special to keep William's memory alive with Bodhi and through Bodhi. Because I know, like 40, 50 years ago, if you had a child who died, you probably would never talk about them. And if you had another subsequent child, that child may not even know about their sibling until years later. And that just wasn't the path for us. I couldn't see shutting William away.
No.
I didn't want, he's my son. He deserves just as much airtime as my living children.
Good point. And I see your big sign there that says Skittles Road, and I know that you've
Yeah.
said that that was William's favorite treat.
Well, it was the treat that, so the day that William died, like I told you before, Nick and he went up to the top of the mountain and they were with our friends, a couple other kids, and they were feeding each other Skittles on the weight because they had to take a tram up to the top. And so that's the treat that they shared that day. Um, And then William died, and a few days later, that family they ended up staying at the mountain. They went out and they spread Skittles all over the mountain in his honor. And I told the president of Big Sky that story, and they decided to name the trail that William died on Skittles Road.
That is what they named it.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, that is
yeah.
precious. I love that.
Yes, yeah, that it feels nice to have that memory there
Oh,
for everybody. And people that we know who go to Big Sky, they'll send us pictures of the sign at Big Sky. So it's a community building sign and as well.
and Susan, if you don't mind, like tell me about your nonprofit and what it's all about and how people can help if they want.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I would love to. So like I said, not everybody needs to go out and change the world after their child dies. I happen to have some capacity to be able to serve. Um, and I find serving others has really helped in my grief. Um, and it took years. Joe, like I am now 7 years out from the death of William. It took me a good 3 to 4 years to feel any type of capacity to give back. And you know, William, as we've talked about, didn't really die of any specific cause that I could sort of rally around. I'm so impressed by, moms of kids who die from cancer, and they really get involved in cancer research and raising funds. I didn't have that sort of cause to rally around, but what I do understand is profound grief. And I have walked this path now in trying to navigate how to grieve and how to show up for your family in grief. And I've realized that it's such an underseen um, area of support. 1 in 11 children will experience the death of a parent or a sibling before they turn 18. And 1 in 11 is a lot of children.
Yeah, it is.
And there's so little grief support out there that's accessible for families. We had access to all the grief support that we needed, like I've told you, the therapists and the peer support groups. We got to travel a ton after William died. My husband was capable of taking 6 months off of work so that we could be together as a family. Most people are lucky if they get 3 days paid bereavement leave in the United States. So grief just isn't seen as an important cause in a family's life. And so our organization has sort of stepped into this space of wanting to support families who are going through transformational loss, like the loss of a child or a spouse. And the way that we've decided to tackle that is by our initiative that is called the Greenhouse. We're in the midst of fundraising right now so that we can buy a single family home on Cape Cod, where I grew up in Massachusetts, so that we will be able to send grieving families away for 1 week free respite trips. Like I said, we got to travel a lot after William died to try to figure out what we were like as a family of three versus a family of four. That change was so significant, and we needed to relearn how to be a family and move forward. And so many
That's
families,
that's
they don't
interesting.
get,
Yeah.
yeah. And so many families don't get the opportunity or the time and the space to do that. And then they unravel even more. There's so much more loss, maybe divorce, or that just things in your family um, just never come to some sort of stasis. You'll never go back to what you were before, but you need to figure out how to transform. And if you're not given that opportunity, there's just so many adverse outcomes for children, especially, but for adults too. And so we're hoping to give families just a minute of a reprieve to breathe together, to spend time together outside of your regular program at home where you have to walk by your child's bedroom, for instance, or you've got to pay the mortgage, or like all of the things that just sort of pile on and make grief even harder. So we're really hopeful that this house that we plan to buy will provide families with just a little respite.
I love that.
Um, Me too. I'm
Wow.
really excited about it. So we just today we got a $10,000 donation. So we're up to $627,000, which is
Wow.
amazing. But our goal is to raise $2.5 million to be able to purchase a home, renovate, and then sustain it
Yes.
for, a very long time so that we'd like to serve 52 families a year for free.
Amazing. Every
Yeah.
week of the year.
Every
Uh,
week of the year.
so where can people find
Yeah, so we
a
have all our
place to donate?
information on our website. It's the organization that we started, the nonprofit 501(c)(3 is Williams Be Yourself Challenge. And our website is WBYC WBYCgiving.org.
Awesome. That is
Um,
amazing.
yeah, so it'll take a while to raise that type of funding, but if there's listeners out there who want to support, I'm more than happy to talk directly to you, or you can donate directly on the website. And then I'm also on Instagram, like you said at the very beginning, as Bereavement Mom. I just like I'm really leaning into this role. I'm not hiding
I
but
find
what
I
I
find
stand
you
for.
so inspirational on there. I love it. I like
Thank
it's not
you.
always positive, like you said,
No.
not always happy, but it's still inspiring, and it gets me even a little motivated to get out of my, if I'm complaining about something stupid in my day, I'm like, okay, if she can get up and do this and have this special like positive attitude, then I can too.
Oh, I'm so glad. I guess not from the website, but or from Instagram, but I also write a Substack. I write letters to William. I call it Dear William, and one of my friends. The best compliment I've ever gotten was like, when I read your Substacks, I want to be a better parent. Because I'm talking about how I parent William as a I parent him even though he's dead, and just the experiences that I've had and the things that I've learned as a bereaved mom, they come across in my Instagram, in my writing, and for my friend, for him to want to be a better dad. That's like, okay, I'm here, that's it, I'm
There's
done.
no bigger
Like
compliment than that.
exactly. So yeah, I'm trying to create more space and more awareness for what it's like to be a bereaved parent, because it's really hard. And a lot of people don't talk about it because it's really hard and it makes all of us really uncomfortable. And
And that's what we're
so,
trying to do here is open up, that discussion. And that's why I've been so happy and honored that you were willing to be on today. And I can't thank
yeah.
you enough for that. And
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank